For most England fans, the All Blacks remains the prize scalp. In 2003, Mike Tindall helped England win. Tom Wood was man of the match in 2012, and Jonny May was front of house in 2019.
It was always the test match you wanted to win because they had that aura about them.
The Maori culture, the Haka, their dominance for so many years. There was something different about playing the All Blacks.
Do you remember your personal mindset going into the game?
I do remember being on the side of a scrum, looking up at two of my literal heroes, McCaw opposite me, Kieran Reid, and seeing the blood kind of drain out of their face when they realised they weren't going to win this game.
You mentioned Eddie. How did he set you up that week?
I'm pretty sure he bought a samurai sword. He might have chopped into a watermelon or something to show how sharp it was we were going to cut through them. My tactic with the Haka is always just to look over it. I always think I want to be like a strike from the long grass, go unnoticed.
Do England win against the All Blacks?
I think England should be licking their lips.
They won't have a better opportunity, I don't think.
No.
Into the final moments, Alex Payne trying to keep this side going forward. Haskell takes it on now with just relentless chat, largely about himself. And there's Tindall to add the finishing touch of glamour and World Cup winning stories. That is how you podcast.
Hello Dream Team, welcome along to this week's episode of the Good, the Bad The Rugby, proudly sponsored by Continental Tyres, our go-to for premium tyres. A Continental, safety, performance and grip are the name of the game. The complete opposite of this unpredictable show where we're never quite sure how the journey will unfold, but this week it's a goodie, so buckle up and enjoy the ride. To begin, for most England fans, the All Blacks remains the prize scalp. It's the mystique, it's their panache, it's their brilliance and it's their fearlessness. It's their Haka, and it is their history of dominance. In the first 100-odd years of this fixture, England managed just 4 wins. But in the last 20-odd years of this fixture, England have managed 4 wins, and perhaps could and should have had more. England are no longer hitting hope against New Zealand. More and more England fans sort of somehow dare to expect. And that expectation stems from 3 statement wins over those in black. 3 wins that changed the way English rugby thinks about New Zealand. And on this week's show, we explore them with 3 men who were there. In 2003, Mike Tindall helped England win in windy Wellington. Tom Wood was man of the match in 2012, and Jonny May was front of house in 2019 in Yokohama. 3 victories where England took on the most dominant team in the sport and thought, we'll have a bit of that. Welcome along, gentlemen. I don't know what it is about England against New Zealand, but for those of us who don't ever get the joy of running over the whitewash, it is very, very special. Is that the same for you as a player? I'll start with you first of all, Tins, or is it just another test match for those in England camp?
No, I think going back to when I was playing in a different era, as I went back and watched this match, it was like, oh my God, it's so bad. But there's good to see some silver slippers still out there stamping on people. Actually, Josh got his head properly trampled on purpose, and they won the penalty, which I thought was quite unique. No, I think it is. I think it was the development, that group sort of developed the Haka to what it is now, which is another level. But they've always been seen as the best on the planet. I think, I don't want to do a disservice to anyone who beats them now. I don't think that's what they're thought of at this moment. A lot of people are talking about the sort of invincibility as being cracked of late, and they are now beatable. They're becoming more mortal. People see that they do bleed. And sort of South Africa are probably going the other way, but it was always the test match you wanted to win because they had that aura about them. They were, at that point back in the early 2000s, they'd won the most World Cups, and they were that team that you always want to beat. And going down, I think Clive had made he definitely did that tour on purpose to set us a challenge, but also set them a challenge if we went down there and we won both games, because the World Cup was just around the corner. Yeah. They hadn't beaten, neither Australia or New Zealand had beaten us in 3 years. But they were all at our place. So it was to go down there, it doesn't really matter where we play you, we'll still take you on. Now, we probably shouldn't have won that game, but somehow we did. But yeah, it was always the pinnacle of facing the Haka and then playing them.
For those of us who are of a certain age, we would have grown up on wins over New Zealand being very rare. I remember 93, Will Carling's a lot, and I remember 95 and getting well and truly lomooed in a World Cup semi-final. And it was always the sort of the peak of the mountain. But for someone who would have watched New Zealand growing up, what was the difference between being a young fan watching England, New Zealand, and preparing for England, New Zealand?
Oh, I probably had a fairly unique perspective on it. 'Cause I actually went to New Zealand for a year. I lived out there for a year. I not grew up, but I played rugby in McCaw country, and I grew up watching McCaw. He was, an idol of my hero. Kieran as well. I probably watched more Super Rugby as a kid than I watched. The Premiership wasn't really available to watch. I watched Canterbury Crusaders and that. They were my favourite team. I had a bit of an infatuation with the Kiwi rugby anyway. So I felt like I had a huge respect for it, but I also felt like I had a bit of an understanding of it as well, having played out there and lived in the culture for a little while.
How did your trip to New Zealand come about? What were you, 19 or something?
Yeah, 18, 19. I was on the books at Worcester Academy. I'd been in there for a couple of years, sort of out of school, and I picked up an injury and didn't play much in the season. And I thought the last thing I want now is a pre-season. Last thing I wanted to go and spend all my time in the gym. Not really playing any rugby, so I didn't like the idea of a pre-season. I thought I could go to the Southern Hemisphere and reverse the seasons and play out there. I also do remember sort of fairly cornily talking to my dad about, is rugby a real sort of an ambition and a realistic prospect for you? And if so, where's the best sort of university for you to go? And if you were going to go to uni in England to be a doctor, to be a vet, to be an architect, what would be the best university to go to? And at the time, it was a pretty obvious answer that if you're going to get the best sort of rugby education, you go to New Zealand.
And did you come back from that with a greater sort of, it's not deference necessarily, but did you buy into the mystique that we all sort of, those of us of a certain age certainly grew up learning about and reading about and thinking of New Zealand rugby? Did it grow that, or did it dispel it?
Both. I think I loved it. Like I loved being immersed in it. I was the sort of person that wanted to adopt it a little bit. So I didn't rebel against it. I wasn't sort of trying to impose my Englishness on it. I wanted to go and immerse myself in it and enjoy it. I remember having the Haka performed for me at the local school where I worked. So as I left the local school, which was Waitaki Boys School, the whole school came out in force and did a Haka with me. There's just me stood on the steps in a suit and tie while the whole school performs a Haka for you, which is, it's pretty spine tingling. I always associated the Haka with the All Blacks, but of course they've got them for various schools or occasions. They've got them at ceremonies. They do them at the airport when you arrive at the World Cup. It's not just a pre-match ritual. They do it for all sorts of reasons. They even do it against each other simultaneously. So they'll have like a local rival school game, and it'll be happening on the sidelines. Crowds get involved. It's quite different when you're over there.
There's been a lot of good videos on YouTube that you can look up about schools going Haka to Haka. It's always good.
It's at funerals. It's a respectful thing, and you kind of learn to see it different. I learned to do it as well. I was taught how to do it and lead it, and I. While it's a cultural appropriation now, I suppose, but at the time it was great fun, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed learning about it and immersing myself in it. And when I came back, I had the same sort of reverence for it. I had the same respect for it, but I didn't have any sort of fear or, some of the mystique had probably been broken down a little bit, so it was less unknown for me.
2012 was England's biggest win over New Zealand, but I think most people would say that 2019 was England's most impressive win over New Zealand, that World Cup semi-final, which brings in Jonny May. We'll come on to the performance in a moment or two, but Jonny, we did a really nice show, I think earlier this year, where we went back to Wootton Bassett, where you used to sort of run around knee-high to a grasshopper. What were your earliest memories of England against New Zealand? What were the teams or the fixtures that you might have watched as a kid growing up, and your memories of those?
Yeah, it's just whenever New Zealand were playing, it was just such an exciting thing. I remember being young, just watching the Haka and the players they had. It was like the Carlos Spencers, Jonah Lomus, Umunga, those guys. I just remember being so excited to watch play, a little bit like I feel about watching the America basketball team play now. Like, they've just got the biggest stars of the game. If it's not supporting England, it's supporting New Zealand. You just couldn't wait to watch them play. And again, the Haka, I think when you're younger, it's just a little bit different, isn't it? And very exciting to watch. It's just a big part of how I fell in love with the game growing up. I just remember such a huge excitement to watch New Zealand play whenever, really.
It is not only sort of, I suppose, the fixture that brings out the England fans in the greatest numbers. It's actually also, certainly was back in the day, the most commercially valuable game, and I'm speaking purely from a Sky Sports perspective, but England against New Zealand, particularly at Twickenham, was of greater commercial value than even most Lions tests, which just shows you how big this ticket is. I suppose the theme of the show that we're going to get into is this: have England moved from hit and hope to a bit more expectation? And what role did you and your various wins over England take, therefore? Shall we go into 2003 then? That fixture was in many ways, it was the first of the summer tour. You then went on to beat Australia off the back of it, and you had built up a heck of a momentum against Southern Hemisphere teams. You weren't losing at Twickenham. You were obviously having problems completing Grand Slams, but you had very much deconstructed the fear of the Southern Hemisphere Big Three. You've touched already on the fact that Clive wanted the ultimate test in June before the World Cup came along in September and October later that year. What do you remember of the build-up to that tour, of the expectations that were being put on you, and of how confident you were travelling to New Zealand to beat the All Blacks?
I think, from my perspective, I can't remember. I think it was around my 25th cap or something, and I'd only lost 3 games, I'd only lost to South Africa once in the first test in 2000, and then we'd lost to Scotland and we'd lost to Ireland. So, from my point of view, it wasn't really a big deal. It was like we're just going down to beat them again. Good thing about that team was we sort of backed ourselves. I mean, it was a horrendous game. I did watch it back, and it's just disappointed the memory, if I'm honest.
It wasn't quite as glorious as it might have felt.
No, they were all over us in the first half. The wind was savage, and we played into the wind in the first half, and it was just impossible to get out. So we were just under the cosh all the way through that first half. But even though under the cosh, not really stressed in the first half, we'd given away so many penalties. You talk about 10 penalties and under in a game. I think in the whole game we gave away 20 penalties. But off the...
Is that teacup or not?
That's definitely not.
Probably not.
It's not teacup, but they started off worse. I sort of wrote down... We basically had the perfect start, kick-off, turnover, they give away a penalty after 45 seconds. Wind was so bad I was holding the ball for Jonny, which we'd worked on all week.
You had done that?
We had worked on it because we knew it was going to be bad, so I was always going to hold the ball, whereas if you compare that to Carlos Spencer, he tried to stand it up. His first shot goal, he tried to stand it up his own, fell off 3 times before they got someone in to hold it. And like a job of holding this, whether this makes a difference or not for Jonny, I never wanted to see Jonny kick the ball, because if it's really windy and you're looking at the ball when your kicker walks in, you automatically take your finger off just before he kicks the ball. So my thing with Jonny, we worked at it because he was like, you don't need to take your finger off it because it's just going to go. All you got to do is have a light finger on top. It'll never fall over. So I would always look at the floor so I could never see him kick it.
I can actually remember you covering your eyes.
Yeah, so you can never see him kick it, so I'll never move my finger. Whereas you look at whether it makes a difference or not for Carlos Spencer, they've got a guy on a knee, so he's half the size of him, so he's completely in your eye line.
NFL style.
Yeah, but he's completely in your eye line and everything. And then every one of them is like doing that just before you kick the ball.
And whose call was it to practice that? Was that a sort of a Woodward 1%er? Was that Dave Allred? Was that Jonny's saying?
It's Dave Allred. It's Dave Allred and Jonny. Jonny just wants to make sure that ball doesn't shift in any way when he hits the ball. And so having a conversation, because I used to kick with him all the time at that point, it was like, just don't take your finger off the ball. So the only way of doing that was not looking at the ball.
And did you chat to him as he prepared? Do you say, like when you're on the tee and you think, I'd fade it outside the tree and bring it down into the...
No, that's like me. That's like me
Tins.
being on the bag for Jordan Spieth and going, mate, I think it's coming off the right.
Right. Okay.
And him go, shut the fuck up.
Well, I only asked the question because you've got some pretty strong opinions on most things in life, whether they're invited or not, which is why I just wondered whether that was the thing.
That one, you don't step in. He's got his own routine. He's finding someone in the crowd that he's aiming at. And then, there were a couple of kicks where he's aimed outside, he just bent round, and pretty much every single one of them are in my memory. So obviously he was dead right. Went through the middle. It was, I think he missed one that he tried from about 55, and it just dropped short. I mean, it was online, but he just dropped it short. But yeah, he was. He did hit a drop goal in that game where I think we had an overlap.
Yeah,
but we'll let him off.
Came away with the win. There was a very interesting sort of mindset shift as well, and I don't know whether this was something that your crews sort of built on, but Clive Woodward refused to call them the All Blacks. Was that ever a thing in the team meeting room? Was that?
But I think
only to be referred to as New Zealand.
Yeah, not that I remember, but that's sort of what Clive did, and it was sort of those early coaching antics that was then kicked into hyperdrive by like Warren Gatlin and Eddie, and just because he knows it'll get underneath their skin.
Yeah.
Because they're most Kiwis will never say New Zealand; they'll always just call it the All Blacks because that's their brand.
Yeah.
So it's probably quite smart by Clive just to try and ruffle and get underneath people's skin and win the sort of the headline battles in the papers.
There were various moments in that 03 game that will live long in the legend of English rugby, one of which is the six-man scrum, or certainly Back and Dallaglio in the Simmet. Did you end up packing down at flanker? Have I made that
I
up?
did on our ball.
On your ball?
Basically on our ball.
Would you like to compare flanking notes with Jonny May, our other resident?
Just because, actually, I've had a Jonny May moment for Gloucester when I was at 8. So I'm never going to get into that with Johnny because it's more difficult than you seem.
This was you at 8, wasn't it?
Yeah,
you got stretched it off.
Stretch it off.
No, not quite stretch it off. But
Didn't you get you got the golf cart on?
I basically as I went to, as they call it, slingshot and push the second rows in. I pushed their arses together, and then my head had nowhere to go. So literally, my neck went cracked fully into spasm, and I had to get off.
Turtled your head in here.
So Johnny, it's
we're
harder
here talking
than
about England against New Zealand, the greatest matchup. We've got Tins being wheeled off on a golf trolley.
So I packed down, but it was. I mean, Loz. I thought Backy's yellow card was really harsh because we had a lot in the second half, a lot of penalties. So they dropped 4 or 5 penalties really early on, which gave us a sort of time to get up, and then we gave away loads in the second half of the first half. And I think for it to carry it over, it didn't used to carry over in those days. So I think Stuart Dickinson, the ref, it was the first penalty. Backy basically got yellow carded, and then Carlos Spencer made a line break, and because we've got G brands, GBNRNZ live and kicking, Marshy absolutely butchered it. You did, Marshy. He made a break, passed it inside to Marshy. Marshy actually rolled his ankle, but if he'd have moved it one more, Rokakoku would have walked in. But he's like rolled his ankle and tried to step back inside, got absolutely melted, and then Backy's killed the ball. And because of where we were, 5 yards out from our own scrum, he's got a yellow card, and then we just went into defensive mode for the next sort of 10 minutes. Our defence was so good, and this is what I talk about with like New Zealand. It was like we'd convinced them that it had to go through the middle of us. If they'd have gone wide, we would have been absolutely dead and buried because we would have just run out of numbers eventually. But they kept stepping back inside, or and you just get swept.
But how do you do that? How do you convince them to do that?
I don't know. This is what I was talking about with the psyche. I don't know whether they, because they hadn't beaten us, they were thinking of ways they had to win. Obviously, the conditions made it hard to move the ball around. There was so many mistakes and errors, which gave loads of like jackal and turnover opportunities. But they just never gave it any air. So like the likes of Joe Rokakoku didn't really touch the ball, and Caleb Ralph was on the other wing. We just kept eating it up, and then we get a turnover, and then because we were with the wind in the second half. Like if we did turn over, we could just hoof it, and it was like back to your own like halfway line 22, and come back at us again, and we'll try and get a turnover again. And we actually played better rugby when we had 30 men because we had to keep the ball. Yeah. So we actually kept the ball relatively well.
There was that wonderful quote off the back of the six-man scrum where in the press pack afterwards, as England celebrated their win, one of the journalists turned to Martin Johnson and said, "Amazing to hold out the All Blacks with only 6 men in your scrum on your own line." Repeated scrum after scrum after scrum. What was going through your head, Martin? He said, "My spine," which I thought was a very good line and stands the test of time as well. And off the back of that and the win, Woodward's men were referred to as white orcs on steroids. Do you remember that being a badge of honour?
Yeah, but New Zealand's pack was heavier than ours. I remember. I remember when I watched it back that they had about 8 kilos on us. But it sort of went out through that whole way. I mean, realistically, if you look at that game, as good as Spencer was, I mean, he made 5 line breaks, I think, in that game, and we could have scored three tries. Him missing, I think he got 2 from 5 or 6, and that made the difference. And
one of which was eminently kickable.
2 of which were what
Very
you would call
kickable.
a red zone kick in between the 15-metre hashes and in between the 40. And one was a complete duck hook. But he could. But at the same time, he'd say, "Well, I carved them open enough times that we should have finished it off." And they just didn't make that New Zealand pass. They normally make the unselfish pass, and they didn't that day.
You said a really interesting thing before we started recording this, which is, having watched it back, I've got absolutely no idea how we won that game. And what is a more normal thing, particularly for England fans, is you come up against New Zealand, you're like, I've got no idea how we lost that game.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting team that you had, which won a game despite not playing very well against the All Blacks, rather than being plucky losers.
When I think about it, what was good about that team is the ability to change the way they play. Like, as soon as we went down to 30 men, I know it's simple now. Everything was a drive, pick and go, just eat time.
Yeah.
And we did everything we did. The old Kit Kats where you take it, Lowell will go down. Oh, there's nothing wrong with him, but he'll just, another minute before he stops the clock, and then you get back up. We're very good at doing that, and then finding a way to get the job done. Now, I'll still say we should never have got the job done that day, but somehow we did.
It's in the bag. Did you celebrate? You also had Australia a week later.
We always celebrated.
Did you? And what is
days
this?
Of great? They were in the day. Well, actually, that night I went out with Lol and Jace, and it was a good night. It was a good night. Let's just put it that way. It was a good night. Ended up in a bar. A game called Teller. I think have I told this before? So you basically, if you make a flippant comment.
Yeah.
I know this is not very 2024, but forgive us, it's 21 years ago. If you make a flippant comment about a girl, you had to go tell her.
Yeah.
So basically, you got called out on anything that you said. And I made a flippant comment about a massive Maori lad dancing, because I knew how bad it was. And Jace went, "Go tell him," which was awkward. So I almost had a fight. I had to basically. He went mad at me, and then I managed to calm him down. But then we ended up on a random boat after scaling a marine port fence. I don't know. It was a very interesting night.
That's what you do if you beat the All Blacks.
That's what you do when you're out with Leonard and Lawrence.
I'm going all Gwyneth Paltrow, not for the first time, but it's in that sort of sliding doors moment, that win in Wellington, and it's easy to say either way. How big a piece of the jigsaw for what was to come in Sydney 4 or 5 months later was that? As much probably for your opponents as for you.
Yeah, I think it was always about getting that, and that's how Clive basically sold it. It's about getting that mental edge, and the fact that they know that they haven't beaten us on our own patch, but let's go prove that they can't even beat us on theirs. And then especially going to Australia, we absolutely hammered them the week after.
That's a pretty big gamble, though, isn't it?
It is a big gamble, but I think Clive, this first time Clive was uber confident in us, and I think it was paid. I think it was paid better off that Australia game of going to Melbourne and just, I can't remember what it was,
25-14.
25-14, but it should have been more than that. We absolutely hammered them. And
you scored that day, actually.
I did score that day, and Josh absolutely murdered Matt Rogers.
He had that hole cut in his surfboard.
I mean,
popped a rib.
Yeah, I mean,
that was the story. Anyway.
But it was that went through the that Matt Rogers hit him late, and like one thing you don't do, Josh is pretty much a bit of a psycho anyway. And for 10 minutes, he was just waiting.
Really?
And then that ball floated in the air. And Josh, when he hits, can hit very hard.
Yeah.
And absolutely murdered him.
Right.
And then just got up, stood over him and went, "Whatever you said before, fuck you."
Right.
And then he was rolling around on the floor. He couldn't even tough man it out. It was like one of those where you can't even fake it out. It didn't hurt. Yeah.
What was Clive like off the back of that win over New Zealand? Did he spend a lot of time on telling you what you'd achieved, or was he off on
No, I think he always recognised it. He always recognised big wins. I actually remember the one in 2000 against South Africa and winning that second test. I remember him being more elated about that one. I think he knew we needed to win those games.
Yeah.
So to make it a bit more business as usual sort of thing, and actually get used to winning. I do remember through that period, that was the more and more it's like get used to winning and expect that, and then go beyond number one, and how do we keep winning?
Being comfortable with a favourites tag as well, not always used to that. So.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that sort of stuff, and that's what Clive's where Clive's strengths were. So yeah, I mean, it was because we had this Australia game was the second game. We didn't really have loads of time. It was noted, and then we had to get ready to beat Australia in Australia.
And from there, things followed all the way to the 22nd of November, 2003, and a very famous night. That is probably part one of sort of this three-part where are England now when it comes to taking on New Zealand. It was a hugely significant victory in Wellington, not just for your team, but I think for England fans in general. Now for a message brought to you by American Express. We all know how tricky it can be to find the right work-life balance. Amex understands that it's essential to work hard and play hard, so we wanted to share a bit about the American Express business cards.
With an Amex business card, you can earn points on your business transactions and then use those points to switch off and enjoy some downtime. For instance, you can earn points on everyday office purchases like furniture, a new laptop, or even a team's day out, and then use those points to help you unwind and recharge.
Whether it's brand new set of DJ decks for Hask or some shiny new golf clubs for Tins, or even booking that once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Lions on tour in Australia, the American Express business cards can help you achieve that perfect balance in life. For more information, search Amex Business Card. Terms and annual fees apply. 18+, subject to status. Let's move on to 2012 at Twickenham. New Zealand were world champions. The 2011 to 2015 vintage considered one of the greatest rugby sides of all time, and they were very much in the middle of that patch. England's last win over New Zealand was the game we've been talking about, 2003 in Wellington. This fixture was the last of 2012. England had won 5, lost 5 and drawn 1 in Stuart Lancaster's first year in charge, but they had also lost to Australia and South Africa in the 2 weeks before. Give us a little sense of where you felt this England team were coming into the big final fixture of the year.
I think we probably found quite hard done by in the sort of the narrative. I think we only lost by a point to South Africa the week before, which I don't think there's any shame in that. It was actually a real tough physical game. We stood up pretty well and just fell the wrong side of the result, which happens. I felt like we were building nicely behind the scenes. All things were going well. I believed in sort of the messaging and the game plan and the coaches and the players that were being put in place. We just hadn't quite delivered it on the big stage yet. So we felt like it was all going in the right direction, but we needed something to be a kind of catalyst for us and to prove to the world that to sort of solidify that's actually got some merit and some truth and weight behind it. So. We really felt like we needed that performance to make sure that we were given a little bit of space to continue on that journey, because another loss, especially if it would have been a humiliating one on the end of the autumn series, would have meant big pressure for coaches and players alike. And you don't get many losses in an England shirt before questions start being asked.
You were, what were you, 26 years old, something like that?
I think so.
13 old caps. So you were beginning to get.
I was actually not. I'd not played much. Stuart Lancaster came in, and I'd done the sort of the build up to the Six Nations in the kind of captaincy role, doing the Six Nations launch and everything, if you remember. But I'd picked up a foot injury and didn't play a single game, so I didn't play any games in the Six Nations, and I didn't play in the summer tour. I'd just come back into the squad into the autumn, and I felt strangely senior having not played. A lot of the guys were very young and were only just getting going in the England side. I'd been on the bench for Fiji, which we won quite comfortably. I'd been on the bench against Australia that we lost. I think I'd had 15, 20 minutes off the bench, and I'd come back in for South Africa, which had been more like us, I think, as a performance, but obviously we didn't quite get the result. So for me, I felt like I was just re-establishing myself in the team, but I felt like I'd probably been around a bit more than most because I'd been to the World Cup in 2011.
Yeah.
I'd played that Six Nations before with Tins and the boys, and there'd been fairly wholesale changes under Stuart Lancaster when he came in. A few of the old guard were moved aside, and we kind of started again.
There's a splutter from one at the table. Hold it in, Tins. Hold it in.
Well, it's kind of as it happens with World Cup cycles and things, but it was. It's a little bit of a crowning moment for me, really, because I hadn't had a chance under Stuart Lancaster yet, really, and was just getting going in it. And I think I mentioned earlier, I had a strange sort of belief in the team, the systems, and myself, and a confidence that we would win that game. I remember talking about it in the media and in the build-up, and people sort of looking at me puzzled as to where this confidence was coming from, or but I just genuinely believed it, and like I say, it's probably delusional. It worked in our favour on that occasion. I've lost to New Zealand plenty of times with the same amount of belief, so who knows?
I love the fact you were saying how confident you were, because I think if you looked outside the camp, I mean, the bookies had you at 9-1 outsiders for a home game, which is, I mean, that's odds that Tins would pile
I was
on.
offended. I remember, and I don't know what it was. Like I say, like looking back now, I don't really know what I can base it on. But I was offended that they didn't give us any chance of winning. I'm thinking I'm playing for England in front of my home crowd at Twickenham. Like, I'm never going into a game feeling like an underdog or like I'm here to make up the numbers. And like I say, I don't really know whether it was legitimate, where it was founded, but that was my approach going into the game.
Your squad also had 206 caps, whereas New Zealand's had nearly 800. Do you remember the build?
And they were World Cup winners, and they were 22 games unbeaten, something like that. Not lost for two years on the bounce. I think they were 2 years unbeaten in 22 games or something going into that game. And I think that game would have been a record had they beaten us. It would have been a record. So yeah, nothing was in our favour really, and we'd just lost to the two of the Southern Hemisphere giants the weeks before. So nothing really pointed towards us pulling out a victory.
Do you remember who pushed the buttons then in the build-up to the game? Because obviously Andy Farrell was part of the coaching setup. Stuart Lancaster was beginning to get his feet under the desk. You had some
I feel like
players,
Stuart was more
characters
of
who went on to become big characters.
Yeah, I think Stuart was more of a sort of pragmatic, organisational, logistics, tactics. Andy was more the sort of emotional sort of driver. He would have been pushing it. I mean, Owen was. I was always amazed at how quickly Owen found his feet in international rugby. Like the day he came into the camp, he never felt his way in. He didn't sort of hold anything back to allow others to talk, or just get his head down. From the moment he walked into camp, he was a leader and he was a talker and he was a driver of standards and energy. Which is amazing for someone so young. I think
nothing kind of leaps out about what you might have changed or done in the build up to the game relative to what you had been doing.
I think it's one of those occasions where we genuinely believed in what we were doing, and we were really frustrated we hadn't got the outcomes yet, and that the rest of the world hadn't seen it yet. And I remember being personally quite offended and angry that we hadn't had any credit for what we'd done against South Africa, or that we hadn't got the result that we felt we deserved, maybe.
Yeah. I've got a quote from you here, and you've actually touched on it already, but you said, "No one admired New Zealand rugby more than me. I spent 8 months playing in North Otago back in 2006. Richie McCaw was an absolute hero of mine, and I was in real McCaw country. I had played against Kuro, his junior club," which is what you've touched on. Do you remember your personal mindset going into the game?
Oh, yeah. I was excited. I was excited. It was the first time I'd played against the All Blacks. So it was a huge moment for me. Something like we've talked about the All Blacks a lot. It's just trying to put my finger on what it is that makes them different. I guess like proximity. Obviously, they're a long way away geographically.
You very rarely play them.
It felt exotic, didn't it? With that, I mean, combine it with sort of the Maori culture, the haka, the geographical distance between the teams, and then obviously their track record and their dominance for so many years. There was something sort of exotic and different about playing the All Blacks.
I do think whether it's by purpose or design, the limited amount of time we actually do play them when they come over here now of late, since we used to play them we played them every autumn for a period, but then obviously where there was a falling out about
it's a revenue
splits and everything else, it's then becomes like once every 3 to 4 years. So it then becomes a big thing because the times you get to play them is very rare, and it becomes a way bigger deal off the back of it. I mean, let's not talk about RFU ticket pricing for this weekend, but
how much are the ticket prices this weekend?
Well, it's 210 quid for a ticket, and if you want to go to hospitality, I think it's like 60,
is that like an entry level ticket? Is it 200 quid?
Hey, but you got to pay the bills somehow.
At the start, when you said it's always been the biggest commercial game, it still is, right? It still is the biggest commercial game.
I would guess. I mean, I was talking from a sort of a broadcast, the numbers that it gets in terms of viewing figures.
Every time I've done an autumn, we obviously get tickets to give to friends and family and stuff, and it just seems that the All Blacks tickets are always like an extra 30, 40 quid more than All
because
the other,
you can.
Yeah, well, it's just what it is, isn't it? They're just more expensive than any other game. So I think they probably are.
It's your prize fight. This might be retrofitting it, but I did your 2012 game for Sky. It was one of the first big games I'd done, because I get all misty and wisty-eyed. But I can remember, and again, this might well be retrofitting. I can remember sitting in the broadcast compound before we went to do rehearsals, and you'd lost the 2 previous games, and I think everyone sort of arrived thinking, "Oh God, it's the All Blacks." There just was a really curious energy around the day. And I remember sitting with Miles Harrison, actually, who was the commentator at the time, just saying something feels really different today. And I don't know whether that's the fan who became the broadcaster, or whether that was something that you felt arriving at Twickenham, or whether that just is England All Blacks, that there is, the big dog is in town and there is an opportunity to do something. Was that something you as players arriving that day thought,
It's hard to pass out because, there is so many factors. Like you say, it was the last game of the series. We'd underachieved. Perhaps in our minds, we were on the back of 2 losses. The All Blacks were in town. But I definitely do feel like there was some additional sort of purpose and bite to our preparation and to our, desperation's the wrong word, but it was just like there was a purpose, I guess. There was just a real deliberate purpose and intensity to the approach to the game. I mean, I think I remember, giving it a fair big chat in the media in the build up. So, you back yourself in the corner that way as well. You got to turn up and back that up once you've given it the hype. And I just remember it being one of those occasions where it came together physically and emotionally in the build up. And I actually had to go back and watch it back because rugby just moves on so quick. It doesn't matter how big the game is. You've always got, the next one round the corner. So you never really get to sort of revel in it and enjoy it. It's only since I've retired that I've gone back and watched some of the big games in your career. And my lad's sort of 16 now and everything's on YouTube and that. So you can go back and rewatch it and relive some of the moments. And I was a little bit like Tins. Does your memory, do you have a rose-tinted memory of things? And then also, I watched it, caught Tins doing it, like you analyse yourself. So I'm watching the game, watching myself going, why am I running there? Why am I going around, why am I going around the corner? Get in the game. Why aren't you I'm watching it, commentating on myself, saying, get in the game. Come on, you. And I know I'm man of the match. So I'm like, what are you doing? Have an impact. I'm like, have an impact. Get in the game. You should be carrying that ball.
So what was the answer to the question? Do you watch it back with rose-tinted glasses?
Yeah, I think you do. No, I think you remember it with rose-tinted glasses, and when you go back and rewatch it, you do the opposite. You watch it with a real critical eye, especially of yourself, going, you should be having a bigger impact, a better, why are you walking? Why aren't you getting around that corner? Why aren't you on the ball? Why have you, And I watched the whole game basically with that narrative in the back of my head, saying, "Do more, be better."
So I'm not sure.
Probably because I've been telling my lad how good I was. For the last...
There you go. Man of the match against the All Blacks isn't bad. So I'm not quite sure whether the question is, what do you remember of the game, or what do you think having watched it back? You can pick either of them, but having sort of reminisced on what was one of the greatest days of your career.
I've had sort of over a decade of my memory, really, and I've only just watched it back to kind of refresh the detail. But my memory of it, the biggest things that stand out for me were that moment early in the second half when they raced back into the game. There was like kind of this inevitability about the All Blacks, and it must have felt to everybody in the stadium or watching at home that was the case with us. Dan Carter had an off day with a boot early on. I think he'd missed a couple off the tee. Owen had been immaculate. So we'd snuck out to a 15-point lead without doing anything that special, really. We'd battled bravely and we'd taken our points when they're on offer. New Zealand had probably stuttered a little bit, but then they came racing into it with 2 quick tries, moving the ball, very New Zealand-esque.
Surveyor
and it must have just felt like, right, okay, fun's over. New Zealand have woken up now. The All Blacks are here. The World Cup winners are here. You've had your fun, but, game over. And it felt like we beat them a second time. So it felt like we beat them twice within that game. We'd had our good first half and taken that lead. They came back into it. I think they got within a point of us. It was 15-14 maybe. 2 quick tries. And everyone was kind of having that sort of dejected moment. It must have felt like that in the crowd. And then Brad's breakaway, Manu's
Manu
power
made
running.
That bust, didn't he? That's all I remember.
I think the first one was Brad. Brad went
Manu
through.
took it on and passed it back to Brad.
Yeah, it was a little 1-2 back and forth. And that's another feature of it. I think those two were under a lot of pressure, or Brad in particular. I think there were question marks over, his viability in the centre. Is he creative enough? Does he run those lines? Like Brad's always been absolutely nails. Brilliant for Saracens, like tackles with his face. Always bleeding pretty much every game.
Counter.
Yeah, he was
all those good 12s do.
Yeah.
But there was question marks over his flair and creativity, I think, and then the combination with Manu, and was that the right centre partnership going forward? And then, both of those were absolutely on fire that day, and they linked really well and they defended well. So they kind of they put all the doubters to bed that day. Then Manu obviously bust through the middle. It's like that iconic image of like McCaw hanging off and Carter sprawled out on the floor, like two absolute icons of world rugby, like on their backs.
Manu was 21.
Yeah, peering at Manu as he like powers out of that tackle.
He got kept in the warm-up game for the 2011, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
And
then
was
put
the
Ashy,
splash.
so that put Ashy away. And then
Manu intercepted, didn't he?
Yeah.
From memory, and again, this might be just like me overplaying it in my own mind, but I do remember being on the edge of it, on the side of a scrum, looking up at two of my like literal heroes, and seeing the blood kind of drain out of their face when they realised they weren't going to win this game. I'm looking at McCaw opposite me, and I'm looking at Kieran Reid, two guys I respect so much, but at that moment they didn't have the answers. They just didn't have the answers on the day. The game was getting away from them. And it was a hell of a feeling to be the opposite and just thinking we've got it. Like
any world-class Irish sledging going on at that moment?
Yeah.
No. To be fair, it was all very respectful, but there was a quiet smile within me looking at two guys that you've dreamed of playing against for years, and to know that you've not only done it, not only held your own and been able to compete, but to have accelerated away in the game and got a famous victory.
There have been some pretty seismic centre performances over the years. I think O'Driscoll at Brisbane for the Lions. Can you put anyone alongside Manu that day? That's a big statement, I know.
But I think the ability of Manu to just change a game was always his strength. I think it's always going to be. I don't think it'll haunt Manu, but his injury issues, he never really got that full run at it for
long enough.
A couple of years where we had consistency in selection because the sort of hip injuries that he always got, hip, hamstring, groin. But that day he was just the powerhouse that you knew he could be.
We'll talk Manu 2019 with you, Jonny, in a bit more detail to come. But your memories of playing outside Manu for England?
Oh, he's somebody you definitely want to be playing with. He's literally the toughest guy on the field. You know that.
He knows that?
Yeah, he does. But he doesn't need. It's
a nice place to be in life.
Yeah, he doesn't need to scream and shout about it. I've sold this before. Like his nickname was Chief when he was like 19, 20 in the England men's squad. And he sat at the back of the bus as a 19-year-old. So he is the chief. And to play alongside him, what a great bloke he is, so talented. He's without a doubt one of the most special players I've played with.
Twickenham that day, I mean, you won premierships there. You had some very, very big days there with England. Was it ever noisier than that day?
No, I think it's different. I mean, premiership's obviously awesome, but you've got both crowds there, whereas obviously an international match, it's an English dominant sort of crowd, and when you play that way and when you get a result like that, then the noise was a different level to play. Like you say, played in some big club games and had some good atmospheres, but that's probably the biggest moment at home for England at Twickenham that I can think of.
And you said you did watch it back with your 16-year-old. He's in the Saints Academy?
Yeah, the early
More
development
or less,
stages, not like full-time, still at school and stuff.
What did he make of it?
I don't know, he's pretty quiet, doesn't have a lot to say.
Right.
Yeah, he's probably quietly making notes of any mistakes I made or any, accumulating some ammo. He watches a lot of it back. He probably is more familiar with a lot of it than me because he goes back and watches all the old games, Saints and England and stuff, and he's the sort of person that, like, talking about Manu, he'll have watched Manu's big hits, Manu's fights, Courtney Law's big hits. That's kind of what drives him. That's basically what my search history is these days.
Very nice.
Not many Tom Wood offloading or try scoring.
Tom Wood, the glory is. What do you remember of the aftermath of that game?
the strange thing is I was back preparing for Saints on the Monday morning.
Right.
So it didn't last long.
Life moves
It's not
fast.
like a tour when you can, you can go and cut pretty loose, and it was kind of a bit of a reality check, really. You beat the All Blacks on Saturday. You spend Sunday sort of organising your kit and getting yourself back home. And because Saints had played Friday night, they'd had a full weekend off. In the coaches' eyes, they've had a full sort of recovery weekend.
So it
Monday morning's
doesn't get afforded to you.
Yeah, Monday morning's back hitting bags and doing a full day's graft in the gym and analysis and stuff. So it really didn't last.
Did you celebrate it properly? Or
We did enjoy ourselves. Yeah. There was I'm a massive disciple of Stuart Lancaster's and that era, and I really enjoyed everything about it. But one probable downside of it was we were still carrying the baggage and the pressure of 2011
Thanks,
and the
Tins.
World Cup that kind of turned into a stag do, didn't it?
All right, steady on. I was actually already married.
But we were still pretty scared of any headlines, any wrongdoing, any looking like we're enjoying
So
ourselves
you
too
thumped
much.
the All Blacks, and it was a lime juice and a hot tea.
It
before
was,
bed.
it was back to Pennyhill Park. And we celebrated. I think there was karaoke, there was music, there was a live band.
Pass the
there was,
parcel.
there was
Fancy
there was
dress. Come
drinking,
by,
yeah, there was no streaking through the quad. It was all, it was.
Is that a regret?
It's something that never sat that well with me as an international. Feeling
I think
like
it was a
you
journey, though.
Yeah.
They had to go there.
Twitter had just become a massive thing.
were social media and camera phones and
Yeah.
everything were becoming a big deal, and you just felt like you didn't want any baggage and any headlines that were going to trip you up or derail a campaign or whatever, or undermine how seriously and how hard you were working and how seriously you were taking things.
Yeah.
You didn't want to look like you're on a jolly. And it did seem that, maybe I'm just bitter or whatever, but it did seem like England were scrutinised more than others. Like if Ireland were loose after a game, it's the Mad Paddies and they're enjoying it, and then the crowd gets behind them and actually thinks how brilliant it is that someone so good as O'Driscoll can be on the smash all night. But
Yeah.
whereas England, if Chris Robshaw's doing it, he's arrogant. He's he's not taking it seriously enough, not working hard enough. So it did feel a little bit like that for us. But I also felt like we perhaps got sort of naughty schoolboy treatment a little bit, like we've got to be on our best behaviour and curfew-ish a little bit, and I resented that, if I'm honest.
How would you, if 03 was a stepping stone towards the biggest day in English rugby history, how would you sum up that 2012 win?
It's still, my debut was a special moment for me personally, but in terms of my England rugby sort of era, that's got to be the biggest moment that I was involved in by a long stretch.
I think as well, with it being that team, the team that they played was obviously current world champions a year earlier or whatever it was. Pretty much exactly a year earlier.
Yeah, and they went on to win again.
They went on to win it again in 2015. They were just, the names will always just roll off the tongue. You had literally five to 9 players that were genuinely world class, and I think on a run streak of 22 and to get into end that's in itself it's special for the whole rest of the rugby world, because it's like, again, it's just a chink. So they are human. We can get after them.
Interesting. You've touched on already. It was England's biggest win over New Zealand, the most points they've ever scored against them. It was their first win against the All Blacks in 10 years, as we've said. It was also New Zealand's joint second largest defeat, and at the time, only Australia had beaten them by more. So it does go to show that it was a very, very special day for England fans. Just a very quick note from our friends at NordVPN, who are back and offering Good Bad Rugby listeners an exclusive deal. Did you know? If you're enjoying a holiday abroad during the upcoming half term, you can switch your virtual location to back home, so you can access your streaming services to catch all of the action from the Autumn Nations series. John, have you been watching a little bit of Premiership action over the last few weeks via your NordVPN?
Yeah, via my NordVPN, I've been lucky enough to use it to watch Premiership games. I used it to watch Gloucester versus Newcastle at Kingsholm this weekend.
Christian Wade, hell of a signing. Christian Wade,
yeah, he's on fire. The Gloucester Globetrotters. No, it's good to watch the Gloucester boys throwing it around a little bit. I'm just watching it as a fan now, watching the Premiership as a fan. I'm out of it, just enjoying it, watching it, but I couldn't do it without my VPN.
You're only over in the country for sort of 2 days at a time before you jet off. Your little NordVPN action. You were in Barcelona watching the America's Cup.
Yep, which was amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
For a sport that generally
The graphics on that, I think, are unreal.
Sailing is not easy to watch. Like, live, it's not that easy. It has to be on TV. So and it's really hard to understand the minutiae of it. But when I can see what each of the cyclists are putting out, or whatever they're called, there is an official name for them. What wattage? I can see what wattage they're.
Is it
putting
different
out.
to grinding now? Because it used to be grinders, didn't it?
It is grinding, but they pedal grind.
Yeah. But is it got the same different terminology now?
Because they're on bikes. It's no longer grinding. They call them cyclos or something.
I'm sure this is what NordVPN were looking for, talking about grinding, but keep going. But you can do that via NordVPN as well if you want.
You can see the wind thing. They
Crucial.
You can see where the wind is. They graphic up where the winds, like the heavy spots of wind are, so you can then understand why they tack into those sort of situations, or jibe, whichever way we're going. Now I can't figure out which way that is. So I thought, it was interesting. But whilst I was out there, to get back to NordVPN,
good segue.
Checked into a few of the games that were going on through the weekend and caught up with some of the highlights.
Do friends of the show get a deal or anything?
You only deal in wood, don't you? Have you got broadband?
Pedal.
We can sort you out. We'll get you on a grinding machine. Get your broadband up.
He smokes
got a wood-fired broadband at home.
Yeah, what we will do for you, Tom, is we'll give you the best discount off your NordVPN plan. And to do that, you can go to nordvpn.com/goodbadrugby. Our link, you lucky man, will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And we'll send you the link. You can also access it, dear listeners and viewers, via the podcast episode description box. Let's move it on to 2019.
Can I go for a wee really quickly?
Of course, Johnny. You've waited for an hour and a half, and now it's your moment. But you take a time out.
You haven't chipped in for an hour and a half, and now
you come back when you're ready. Don't take us with you. That's not part of the podcast. Good.
I can even hear him wee now. It's like Leslie Nielsen in the Naked Gun or Naked Gun. Oops.
You flushed, Tommy. Do you wash your hands, Johnny?
I enjoyed
Very
hearing your wee wee.
Did you hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
That microphone is very, very good.
2019, Johnny, Yokohama. And to set the scene, it was a World Cup semi-final. Johnny had actually just scored 2 tries in the quarter-final against Australia. New Zealand were the tournament favourites. They were unbeaten in 18 World Cup matches dating back to 2007. New Zealand won 15 of the past 16 meetings between the two nations, which slightly draws a line through everything we've been building up to this point. Once again, they were back to being the dominant force, but it, I think, to this day remains the most impressive performance, the most complete performance I've ever seen from an England team. You'd come in off a World Cup quarter-final. Give us a little sense of the England team that you were part of and your expectations and preparations going into that game that week, Johnny.
Yeah, wow. It was a very, very special team to be a part of. And we certainly had some momentum behind us. We hadn't won maybe the Grand Slam before or beaten New Zealand in the autumn before that, but we'd beaten some good teams and played some very good rugby. We'd done that big run of wins with Eddie. We'd beaten basically everybody except for New Zealand. We went away to Ireland in the Six Nations opener before that World Cup and had a really good performance there. So yeah, in terms of belief, there was certainly enough of that because we'd proved it with the players we had and the rugby we played. My week was a little bit different because I was my 50th cap against Australia the week before, and literally the last 2 minutes I pulled my hamstring, so I came off, and we finished the game with 14. So I was literally on my own with the physios all week, and my hamstring wasn't that good either. Well, I played. I couldn't properly sprint, but I'm so glad that I did get out there and just to be a part of that game because it was just it was just amazing, really, the way Eddie would sell the story to us and prepare us to have the belief to go out there and do it. The V shape that we did, it's iconic looking back, really.
You mentioned Eddie. How did he set you up that week? What was he telling you?
I'm pretty sure he bought a samurai sword and told us that he believed in what's the word I'm looking for?
Chi.
No, not chi.
Harikari.
It will come to me in a minute. Like
Destiny.
omens, lucky omens. So there was like, I remember there was a full moon that week or something, and he said that's something, and then he spent thousands on this sword, and I'm pretty sure he like had it in the meeting, and he was chopping up. He might have chopped into a watermelon or something to show how sharp it was. We were going to cut through them with this. It was like a real samurai sword that he'd bought, very, very sharp. It cost him a fortune. So yeah, that was the sort of belief that he sold to the team. But again, my week was very, very different.
Was he going to arm you with it? So
Yeah, that would have been helpful.
No, I remember
Chop
he
off a few
used it. He
limbs.
used it the next week to stab into we used to get these cardboard figurettes or figurines of like players all the time with Eddie, like man-size ones, and he was stabbing Faf de Klerk with the samurai sword the following week.
Not sure that one worked quite so well.
Yeah, it worked.
Might have changed that
the
week.
omen worked brilliantly.
It wasn't
the
a full
first
moon
week.
that week.
It wasn't
No.
a full
See,
moon.
that's the kind of stuff people need to see on
Yeah.
the documentary.
Yeah,
Eddie
for sure.
But it was.
stabbing
It was.
Faf
I know.
and then
It
roundhouse
was
kicking.
really, really sharp.
Right.
It was cool. It was a cool sword. But yeah, my week was very like the boys were probably just living the week and building it. But like I said, I was really, really chasing it to get my hamstring ready to play. And I didn't train all week. I was literally up and in the physio room all day, and then we strapped the hell out of it for team run. And it didn't pop. It didn't go again. So that was it. It was sort of I was playing. I probably shouldn't have played. I wasn't ready to play. But I managed 50 minutes, and I remember like early doors we got somebody. We were smashing them. Everybody was just smashing them. 40 was ripping the balls off people. Everybody was smashing them. I put quite a good shot in on a crossfield kick, knocked somebody out. Into everybody was just hit. The physicality of that game was crazy. Underhill and Curry and those guys, everybody was just melting people. Marrow, the intensity of our line speed, and then the physicality that we put on them that day. I don't know where it came from. Maybe the full moon and the sword. But it came from somewhere, and it was nothing like I've ever seen or been a part of.
Just before we get into some of the detail, what do you remember of Spygate?
I don't remember that. I saw that on Tom's brief. What is Spy? I was in the hyperbaric chamber with a bag of ice and a complex,
No, it was Spy.
and a
So you
massage
said
gun and
Spygate.
stretching all week. I don't remember anything from that. Honestly, like I was attached to a machine all week, or I was with the physio. That was my week. But what happened? You tell me what happened in Spygate.
Apparently, Eddie accused Hansen of putting up a camera on the block of flats opposite your training venue. But you were in the hyperbaric chamber,
Yeah, I was in.
not with
I
the
was,
sword.
I was in the hyperbaric chamber. Like I said, I was not with the team that week. But it's funny how Tins said that Clive did those sorts of things. Eddie was a genius at doing things to take pressure off the boys or distract this or play a mind game there. He was brilliant at that. So it's probably just one of those other things. And he decided it was Eddie's idea to do the V. And this is just off. This needs to be fact checked, but I'm pretty sure we were going to get fined for doing that, and that it had been discussed, and there was a fine to pay, and it was like we're doing it anyway. I think it might have been £10,000 that we,
Right.
but it was a fine that the RFU had agreed for us to incur.
Was this because Marler wandered off and
No,
did his
I
own
think
thing?
even just doing the V is a fine, and then what Marler
Right.
does is what Marler does. That was on top of that. Might have been a bit more of a fine. That might have bumped
Right.
it up a bit.
Right. And what do you remember of running out and the atmosphere and the occasion of that semi-final?
Yeah,
Or was that were you oblivious to that?
you're more in it. You really. I look back and think, I was just in it. Like part of you're not when you're looking at that V as a picture is different to when you're standing in the V as a person. But like I said, I remember just the intensity of the physicality of that match, and the speed of it, and the team cohesion, and it all coming together on that day. It was just such a great team effort.
Yeah.
And that's why I wasn't ready to play my best game. But like I'm so glad that I pushed it to get on the field to be a part of that team effort, where it was just such a great team performance, where we really just we stuck it to them on a level that I haven't been a part of ever before or since.
Who did you stand next to in the V, and what was your game face like?
My tactic with the Haka is always just to look over it, because I think like it is not smart to like pick one of them.
We could not be any different.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
like Faz is doing his grin, and Manu always picks somebody, and and I just don't think I'm tough.
Opposite number, mate.
Yeah, I'm not
Opposite
tough
number
enough to get
used,
involved in that. I always think I want to be like a strike from the long grass, go unnoticed.
Strike from the long
Yeah, I like that's not. I'm not gonna hyper. What would the word be like? Your challenge. If you were to stare them out, you're sort of like. I feel like you're fueling them. Maybe that's how I felt of it. I felt like
you're accepting the challenge.
How many planes flew over Yokohama that night?
I don't know. No, not over. No, I'm not looking up at the stars. I look just over the top of it. Like,
Ryan's bells.
Yeah.
Johnny, can you remember how Eddie actually sold you on the V? Like what the philosophy was? It wasn't D2 Mighty Ducks or whatever,
it was
was
sort
it?
of
What's
like
the,
we were going to. It was like the size of it. Do you know what I mean? It was going to like trap them. We're going to trap them, sort of thing, and just give them something.
Funnel them in.
Yeah.
The hot gates.
I read something about the idea was because it was a reverse V, right?
It's like a chalice.
So the idea is
France did the reverse V.
Yeah, so
it came out like an arrow.
The arrow
In 11, whereas England
did that. Sorry, that's
welcomed
what I
them into
mean.
the
A
V.
reverse arrow.
Yeah.
Sorry, because it makes it hard for anyone to focus because it's such a wide peripheral that they can't stare at you. So it's like people. If you imagine, because I'm pretty sure people were actually faced out to try and find someone to stare at. So they weren't in their uniform shape. Some were turned that way, some were turned that way. So I thought it was supposed to be so. They
Change
have
your
to look
perspective.
to you. They have to find you rather than you having to find them. I don't
Johnny,
know.
can I ask, was there any resistance to it within the camp? Did everyone buy into it and love the idea?
And
or
we didn't practice it either. It was like we're gonna.
That was evident because it actually ended up being more
it
of a
wasn't. It wasn't like
V.
it wasn't like a neat one, was it? It had a little bit curved edges. Marla was doing whatever he was doing.
I've got to be honest. I'm not sure how I would have reacted if I'd been in that team environment because I love the Haka. I get why people do it, but and they always try and swing low over the top of it and stuff, and drown. And teams want to drown it out, and the crowd want to almost retort. I actually immerse myself in it. I think it gets me as up for it as it does them. Only I'm not wasting the energy they're wasting. So, and I would exactly do the opposite to you. I'd pick my opposite number out. I remember Leon messing with my opponent.
You're a tougher man than me.
Yeah.
Well, it's a forward thing as well, probably, but it's also a bit of familiarity with the process as well. But if someone would have said to me, we want to do gimmicky's not the right term, but if we want to do something out of the box and do something to try and put them off, and I don't know how I'd have responded to that if I wouldn't have wanted to do it. I don't think I would want to just stand opposite it and face it.
Is this an opportune moment? Did you see the thing that's going viral at the moment between Samoa and England in the rugby league?
Oh, the league.
And they are literally nose to nose.
Yeah.
It is absolutely
head
game
touching
on.
at one point, and then they're like, right, let's go at the end of it.
But everyone is saying, why on earth are the Kiwis doing it in their own 22 and England are almost under their post? Why not bring it back together? Okay, let's not have it necessarily nose to nose, but let's make it eyeball to
rugby
eyeball.
won't allow it.
But this is the point.
And
Is the game union I'm talking about now, has it got to start embracing the opportunities that are staring in the face?
Everyone still remembers the Norm Hewitt and
it made icons of both of them.
Yeah. And I think I was going to say the fact that where it goes is when I watched the 03 one back, it wasn't mic'd, so you couldn't hear it. So I think Carlos Spencer might have led it, but you couldn't hear it. And like Barnsley's talking over it. Whereas now it's because it's so well mic'd up and everything. Everyone can hear it. You don't get the over the top of it. Whereas when it wasn't, you could.
Do you know, if I was at RFU Towers this week, I would write to the New Zealand Rugby football unit and say, should we do it 5 yards apart? And I'd say to World Rugby, we're doing this and we're not paying any fine.
So France have tried numerous ways, and actually they've probably been their bogey team, but they started on because it's 10 to 10 normally, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You got to be behind the 10 metre
line. And then once they started, they walked to the halfway line, didn't they? But they didn't cross over the halfway line.
Well, they started as an arrow, and then they did actually overstep the 10 metre line, and then they got fined off the back of one of the great iconic Rugby World Cup moments.
There is an element of where does it end, and where do you draw lines, and where, and do players then start dreaming up stuff to get themselves in the limelight? The Richie Cocker one's brilliant.
What is the problem with that?
But if people are almost planning to go and do some psychological, it gets
You've still got to respect what it is.
Yeah.
I think you should be allowed to do a team where you come up right on the front of it, but the problem is it's that Samoa. It was England Samoa, wasn't it? The Rugby League one.
Yeah, it's
because
brilliant.
they do it as a straight line. It makes it way easier. I thought it was actually quite
And they're
good.
all bound arms, aren't they? So there's no physical. It's not like you're
That makes you
pushing
quite
each other.
vulnerable, though.
Yeah,
if someone flips.
but it's nose to
kick
nose like
Yeah.
that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
And it
your
was
arms
quite
are-
good by Samo. They sort of stepped back to do the bit where they send their arms forward in the challenge and everything else like that. But it was great to finish with those two guys head to head.
What year was the
li-
Richard Cockerell? Because even I remember
97.
that. So that's
Yeah,
96. So I'm
that
6
was.
years old. I even remember that now. 5, 6. When I started playing rugby, that's what I'm talking about the excitement of it. Is those sorts of moments. Like the Haka is so big,
But
especially
these are the
when you're
moments
young.
the game needs. Like, we. Yeah.
But that
I
image
thought
of
I
Owen
love
sort
Cockerell.
of
I thought he was brilliant.
sniggering, grinning down at it. Yeah.
Did that go up in the team room off the back of that semi-final win? Owen's smirk.
No,
It certainly was front page
it
around the
pops
world.
up on my TikTok or my Instagram feed like every now and again, and I watch it as a spectator. I didn't realise, but Faz looks cool doing that.
Yeah, it does.
It's pretty cool. And then Manu's just looks scary. I'm just in my own head looking over the top of it.
You're looking at the stars.
You're looking at the plough.
Yeah. But yeah,
Full moon.
and then you see what Marla was doing, and he's just been Marla pretending that he doesn't know what the bloke's saying to him or what line he's talking about. It's hilarious, really. So yeah, it was cool. What an amazing experience to be a part of.
What we were talking about with Tom was a sort of a second half blitz against the All Blacks that took the game away. The thing that was so extraordinary about that semi-final was the first 4 minutes. It looked like the whole thing had been orchestrated, choreographed. Everybody knew exactly what was going on from the kickoff all the way through to Manu's try. Was that something that you had worked on and you knew was coming sort of play by play, or was it just sort of a team in
It's just
full
a
working
team
order?
that had played some good rugby, bringing it all together. Do you know what I mean? Like we'd done it before in moments in games and for full games, but it came together that day again and to another level really in terms of particularly the physicality.
Here's a statistic, and actually I read this, and it's a great one from producer Tom. How many games did Manu Tuilagi play for England, having beaten the All Blacks in 2012 all the way through to the start of that 2019 year? So 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, how many games did he play for England?
Well, he didn't play for like 3.5 of 4 years of that.
Yep.
14.
10 games in 7 years for England. What might have been? It goes back to the point you were making, which is
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That is
Robbed
crazy. How many caps
one
has he
of the
got? And
superstars.
he's got what 60, 70 caps, has he?
60 something or other.
And
yeah.
he didn't
should
play
be.
for 4 years when he was young.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. What else do you remember of the game? Do you remember feeling in control throughout, or did you think this is the All Blacks? It's coming. We've got to hold on.
No, I feel like we felt in control. We felt like we were from the second we did that V. We were enforcing our game on them, and yeah, we felt in control. And then I remember afterwards just how special it felt. A lot of our families were all out there. We couldn't quite believe what we'd done once we'd done it. But it came and went so quickly because we had to flip our focus to a final the next week. So it wasn't a big piss up or a celebration. It was like, wow, how amazing, what have we just done? And now we need to flip our heads to the final. And we thought we were going to win that game. We really did believe we were going to go and win that final.
Yeah.
I've never asked this question. Did you overtrain that final week?
Yeah, I probably, because I remember we had a 7-day turnaround and the Springboks had 6. And sometimes I sometimes feel better off the back of the 6-day turnaround because the coaches just leave you alone.
Yeah.
And you end up feeling fresher because you don't train. But the way we were with Eddie and the way we're always going to be is that our DNA as a team, our process was we trained hard. We trained hard that week, and that isn't why it didn't work for us that day. But we did what we did, and that we stuck with that because we did. When Eddie came into the role as head coach, the training went through the roof. We really, really trained hard, and it's part of what made us great.
You know, I remember us doing the show after And I was like, there's no chance we'll lose. If we play like that, there's no chance we're losing this.
That's how we felt. That's exactly how we felt.
And that was the first time, because everyone always talks about, you always want England to lose a World Cup because then you still just you're the only World Cup winner or whatever. And I remember saying to you that I don't mind now. They deserve it. So I always only I want someone, if an England team wins it, I want it them because they're the best. And that day I was like, right, they can win it because they're the best team at this tournament.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how you play until you play the final. So that South Africa Wales game is one of the worst matches I've ever watched.
They had a terrible. They had a really not very great World Cup at all. They hadn't played good rugby. They lost to New Zealand in the group. They were poor against Wales. But then they had that.
Don't go too much into it, Johnny.
Hang on,
South Africans will slide into your DMs about hate.
But they were in the right place at the right time.
They were.
And that is credit to them. Do you think there was an element of that sort of emotional dip off the back of a performance as good as that semi-final?
Yeah, that had to have been. Of course there was. And you put yourself in their shoes now. Written off, no backs against the wall, 6-day turnaround. And then they battered us that day. And it was just a complete different feeling on the pitch that day, because it just wasn't. They spoiled the party. They came out and spoiled the party. It didn't go to plan at all, and I knew from the feeling we got out there, it just didn't go to plan. It didn't feel right. It felt like they were on top of us. No momentum.
Wins.
It wasn't going our way. They've got lots of ingredients coming together to produce an upset, and that's exactly what they did.
For all that you achieved in an England shirt, and I presume what happened in the final will always overshadow what happened in the semi-final, but when you look back on the performances that you were involved in, were there any better than that England one? Was that that Dublin game that you referenced at the start was pretty hot as well?
Yeah, my top three performances and team performances with England would have been that Dublin game opener against Ireland, because they were the favourites and we battered them that day. We beat them well and they played well. We were just better. We were better that day. Then that semi-final, and then it's an odd one. My third best one was actually the semi-final in the last World Cup against South Africa. Team execution of game plan, tightness, physicality, effort. Putting out our best game, but then we lost it. But that was such a great. We very, very, very nearly caused a massive upset in that game, and nobody gave us a chance. So that's still a performance for me and all the boys to be very proud of.
Fascinating. 3 very different England wins, 3 very different eras, but 3 games that have, I think, changed the balance between England and the All Blacks, which leads us on to this weekend. We've done a real trip down the glory years of English rugby, and therefore the All Blacks are probably going to turn up and win by a handful, which is the way these things always tend to go. I'm sure lots of people who watch and listen might hope otherwise. Should we have a quick look at England then, coming into this autumn? They are due a big statement win, particularly off the back of the summer. Does it come in this opening weekend, or given how I think the All Blacks have played 8 times since England last played, is this quite a big ask?
I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a big opportunity for them. Start big against the All Blacks day one. No sort of easing into it. You often in the autumn you ease into it with a Japan or a Fiji or something. With all due respect, you kind of get into the series. Whereas when you're All Blacks day one, it's straight in with a bang. I think Johnny's just used the word ingredients. I think they've got the ingredients. It just needs to come together for the game. And I think it's a good time to play the All Blacks. Like Tins mentioned earlier, the mystique. And the invincibility surrounding them of years gone by is not quite there, so they should be confident going into it. And you're at home at Twickenham, so it's a wicked place to be, I think, as an England player, because I don't think the expectation's that high, is it?
Yeah.
I don't think the pressure's that high on them.
No, but I think they have had a lot of performances where everyone's gone great performance, and they now need some wins to go with those performances.
No, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for a good start and a win for England. And yeah, the performances are building. We've got some very, very talented players. We're back at Twickenham. But there's pressure on the England team because you just don't want to lose that first game. and then people get their pitchforks and start turning on the boys very quickly. But no, I'm hopeful for a win. It's a great opportunity. We've got some great players. We're playing some really good rugby. The performances have been there. So then you just got to hope that it aligns into a result. But it's an exciting game. Really excited to watch it.
One word answers. Do England win against the All Blacks? And it's not just blind hope. It's genuine gut.
Yes.
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 I'm backing them.
Yes.
God, it's coming on, John.
God, I tell you what, well, that in many ways sums up this show, which is the mindset has moved off the back of 100 years where England couldn't find a win to no longer is it just hope. There is a bit of expectation around Steve Borthwick and his men. So we shall watch with great interest to see what happens this weekend. Time for a little bit of housekeeping and one for your calendars. We're thrilled to announce that we're going to be at Hampton Court Palace next year. It's the festival that takes place there at Hampton Court. Tins calls it the summer house, but you'll feel right at home. Join us as we delve into all things Lions, just in time for the Australia tour, plus the usual nonsense as well. The live show will take place on Sunday, June the 15th, which is Father's Day. So if you're hunting for the perfect gift, this could be it. Pre-sale tickets are available from Wednesday, October the 30th, with general sale opening on Friday, November the 1st. Grab your tickets at hamptoncourtpalacefestival.com. We will look forward to seeing you there. Why don't we give a bottle of black eye to Ollie Chesham this week, who's out with injury.
Bless him, that's a shocker, isn't it? Was that intro?
I didn't see it. What did he?
You would have said he was a starter.
Yeah,
sure,
100%.
100%. Black Eye Gin is an award-winning gin, as I'm sure you know, that combines botanicals from each of the leading rugby nations with a core mission of support for the future of the game. £1.50 from each bottle sold funds 3 key categories: research, risk and recovery for past and present rugby players. And the plan is for Black Eye to become one of the biggest donors to rugby-related causes within 5 years. We are asking you to help by swapping a beer for a gin and tonic to help the game you love. Available from Amazon, Ocado and Master of Malt, with more listings to be announced soon. One other date for your diary. John, do you want to read this one?
I haven't got the paper.
He hasn't got the script. Let me do it for you. One other date for your diary. Thursday, December the 5th at Allianz Stadium to celebrate the England rugby legend, Jonny May. Hosted by the whole Good Bad Rugby team, the evening features a gourmet 3-course meal by 2 Michelin star chef Tom Kerridge, all-inclusive drinks and rugby legends, sharing stories from Johnny's incredible career with live music and silent auctions supporting 4Ed and the Black Eye Gin Fund. Thank you for that, Johnny. It promises to be an unforgettable night. Tickets are limited. Secure yours now at AllianzStadiumTwickenham.com. Quick blast from you. How many places have you got left and what's in store?
It's going to be a great night. Like you said, the 4Ed.
The enthusiasm of that great night.
Let me finish. Give me a second. 4Ed Foundation and the Black Eye Gin Foundation, 2 very, very worthy causes. All 3 of you are going to be there, I think. It will be a great night. There aren't many tickets left. And a quick thank you to Watchers of Bath and Continental Tires for sponsoring the event.
Good on you. You're a sponsor's dream. That will be a lot of fun. We'll have a good night.
I'm going to drink some Black Eye Gin.
Are you?
Yes.
That makes it worth coming on its own.
Yeah.
And we're going to play a long game of £1 million a year with a snail or dole for the rest of your life.
We need to have We need a meeting about a meeting, don't we? There's a lot to discuss.
Meetings about meetings. Elsewhere, lock-in is still available. $3.99 for stories behind the scenes here at GBR. Hask's had a busy week of it. I'm sure you've read about that. Our brand new book, The Good, the Bad and the Rugby Unleashed, is out now. You can order your copy from Amazon and all your favourite bookstores. But if you're looking for something extra special, we've got you covered with signed copies available at WH Smith. The book is also available as an audiobook with all 3 of us narrating it. This Saturday, it's England against New Zealand on TNT Sports and Discovery Plus. And keep an eye out on Saturday morning for something very special. If you have got younger members of your family who love their rugby, check out our YouTube series, The Uncoachables, with Max Brown and Rugby with Amy. I'm very excited about it. I think rugby needs content for the younger
generation, Alex.
And we've had a little go at it.
Harry's got to be tuning in. Yeah?
Harry will be tuning in and liking and sharing and subscribing and whatever it is that you do in that regard. Actually, we'll get the young words onto that.
Yep.
Good. Thank you, Tom. That is it for
the right answer.
There we are. That's what he's here for, the big lucid responses. That is a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening and watching The Good, the Bad and the Rugby in partnership with Continental Tires, our go-to for premium tyres, whether on the rugby field or on the road. Safety always comes first. And also, unlike this show, Continental Tires are award-winning. Don't forget to subscribe. Turn on your YouTube notifications. Please do leave us a review and follow us on social media for the latest rugby updates. We are a Folding Pocket production. This episode was produced by Tom Edwards. All eyes on Allianz Stadium this weekend. Let's hope it's a belter. Enjoy it all.